It's Tuesday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Switzerland, and it's Space Café Web Talk time. Our Space Café Web Talk, 33 minutes with Niklas Nienass, will begin soon. Thanks for joining us for our talk today about freedom, science, democracy, Europe's role in a new space race. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. Any responses are very valuable for us and help us to improve. I'm Torsten Kriening, your host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and the new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you are familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcasts. Our latest episode, another masterpiece, featured Yvette Hopkins and the Shetland Space Center. Check it out. It is really worth your time. We also keep our fanship open online for you to support us directly and become a space watcher. The edition 1 has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love. Your support is needed to keep our work alive. If you have missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website, in the event section, and on YouTube. We host our Space Café web talks live weekly. So, I'm honest. I'm always honest, of course, but today I'm especially honest. 6 weeks ago, I did not hear from my guest, who I have today. He was recommended as an engaged, space-interested, next-generation and European politician. That all triggered my interest, and I'm grateful that he followed my invitation before we are hitting the summer break. I'm happy to welcome you today on my show, Niklas Nienass. Niklas is a young German politician of the Alliance 90, the Greens, who has been serving as a member of the European Parliament since 2019. He went to school in Aachen, moved to Rostock for his study, and finished it with a Master of Law in Good Governance. Since 2009, he has been active in the German party, and if I calculated, it was 17 then that you started it, and was elected 2019 into the European Parliament. And that all wouldn't find our interest at first hand if there wouldn't be a 20% share of his time that he dedicates to space topics, and relevant space topics, as you will hear in a minute. He has done some great podcasts, and YouTube videos are about this topic already. And all of that caused our interest. So on his website, we all can read, space policy, that sounds like a distant future, but space travel is currently undergoing rapid change, and we must prepare for this upheaval. We have to prepare ourselves for new private sector players to conquer space. We must prepare ourselves for the fact that powerful states such as the US or China have set in motion a new militarization of space by founding space forces. In view of this space race 2.0, I advocate for a new international set of rules and a new European space strategy. With that, welcome again, Niklas, to our Space Café. So let's kick that off. That all sounds very nice from your website and pleases our ears without any doubt, but let's talk about that concrete. What is space, the space race 2.0 in Europe for you personally today?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. But for the question, what is space 2.0 at the moment, especially for Europe? I think we all know that we're undergoing great changes in the question of spacefaring. That's clear for everybody here. But the question is, what's Europe's role in this? And to be quite honest, if we just look at it from the outside a little bit, I think Europe itself doesn't quite know. And that's basically the problem that I'm addressing. I think we do need a strategy in which direction we want to go. We know that we are very good in Earth observation. We have a huge benefit with our constellations in the European space. But we still need to capitalize on that resources that we have. For example, with Copernicus, with all the data that is streaming down every day, we still need European SMEs to use this data, or at least the European public needs to know about this data, needs to know that we are basically leading in Earth observation, and that European spacefaring, not just the ESA, but all of the single national space agencies, are really don't have to be shy in international competition. And then the next question should be, where do we want to go, and can we find a way to not just follow the international space race that's going on at the moment, but actually actively shape it. And I think that's the very important thing that we have at hand, and that we need to do, not just with individual members of the European Union, but with the whole union, to come together and to work on the space race in the future.
Got it. So before we going on to a global level, you are advocating for a European space strategy and the harmonization of it. What do you mean by that, and how can we achieve that? I mean, recognizing that we are talking about very national space laws, if ever. I mean, Germany is a good example for not having a space law, and being a spacefaring nation. So,
yeah, that's true. But I mean, it's undoubtedly clear that in the future, especially with the current space race 2.0, we will not come out without a national space law in some way or form, right? I mean, we do need to have clear rules about registration, about launches, and so on. You know all of this details that we need to regulate the space endeavors that we will have in future more often. Then that brings the question, okay, so we have a lot of member states of the European Union, the majority of them, who don't have an individual space law. So they will need to build one up and implement it themselves in the future years. Hopefully they're already working on it. Maybe, concerning the German one, maybe they're just telling us they're working on it, but maybe they're just taking some time longer. Hopefully they're even talking to one another. So to, not do completely the opposite, but I'm not so certain about that. Now, let's say we finish all these processes. We have 27, I'm talking about EU member states, of course, 27 different member states' national space laws. What we then regularly do on the European level, and we do that, for example, with the German BGB, so with the civil law, we do that all the time, and also with all the different laws in Europe, we're trying to harmonize them in order to apply rules that are similar in one country to the companies of others and to the people in other countries, to make it easier for our single markets, for people to work together. I mean, that does make sense. If we are a European Union, then we need similar laws. So we regularly harmonize laws, which begs the question, why doing it this way? Why starting with 27 individual laws, building them up at the moment, just to bring them together and make one law, one European law, at least harmonized law in the end? Why not starting from scratch and saying, okay, we basically don't have national space laws at the moment, some, but not in the numbers as we need them, and not on detail as we need them. So why not starting directly on the European level, making a European space law that then also combines the question of regulation in space, or for registration and for spacefaring, with the question on strategy, how to get to a European space industry and space community, how to improve research in space, how to basically combine everything of this. And also, one thing that we must not forget, not every member of the European Union is also part of the ESA. So how can we make sure that the economic benefits of which we also hope to see from space also reaches those members of the European Union that are not currently members of the ESA? And so I think this all can just make sense if we work around it with the European Union as a whole, have a current strategy, a cohesive strategy, as well as a European space law for the whole Union.
Interesting thoughts. I mean, let me chime in here. One of the questions are from Mark, who put them up, who put that up already. How can we connect the different players like EU, ESA, DLR, private and government strategies as one? And I think all of us are in the space sector and being engaged with one or the other space strategy, then following our space law, are asking the same question. So how do we get, what is your vision to get them on a table, on one table, not on a table?
You know, this is this is the moment where I have basically to speak very softly and a little bit like a politician, because it's very hard to just go ahead and say, you know, we're going to do this and this and this in this regard, because we have so many different players whose interest needs to be heard more cohesively. But what needs to be clear is that on the one hand, I think that the model of ESA being open to members who are not in the European Union is very important to have in the future as well. I don't think that it is useful, and there have been already proposals made also in the question of the Conference on the Future of Europe, to just make ESA the new agency for the European Union. But that then leads in a certain way to leaving out the members of ESA who are not part of the European Union, like Great Britain. And I think that is not the way that we want to go. On the other hand, if we have like the European Union represented in ESA, I mean, to be honest, then it's so strong that it basically could stir the way that ESA goes by itself. Maybe it's not as interesting for Great Britain to join, or like others to be part of it or join in the future as well. So we have to find a very good way that works together with ESA, but also we still need a European space agency so a European Union space agency to ensure that we have a cohesive strategy. And in that, I think DLR and the other national member states' space agencies can find their place as well.
Interesting. So what would you see strengthen Europe? So taking into account that we don't have infinite resources in money, people, and other issues are we have in parallel, and pandemic is just one of them. I mean, or the EU crisis, we just, I wouldn't say we came out, we just postponed for a moment. We have our migration politics in Europe, and so on and so forth. I mean, the entire changes are in life we all face day by day. I mean, this brings Europe, like the rest of the world, to problems. So, how to strengthen space in there?
In this regard, I think, especially at the moment, you know that we are spending with the European Union around 2 billion. Sorry, that's German. 2 trillion euros in the next 7 years. We have the Recovery and Resilience Facility, additional to our regular budget that we want to spend over the next years in order to come out of this crisis, which I think is the right way to invest in this crisis to get out of it, and using the investments to future-proof our society and our economy. And for that, we are obviously, all of the Green Deal. We are talking about digitalization, improving digitalization of our companies, and to ensure that our economy in general is more sustainable. Also, we're starting this circular economy. You probably heard of that. But what I ask you, and I think that we should all ask that to politicians at the moment, is more future-oriented than investments in space economy. Because we do know that there's a huge potential in space endeavors. We do know that there's a big race going on at the moment in which Europe is not prepared for at the moment, I do believe. I mean, we're on a good step, but we're just not cohesively, strategically present there. So why not use the investments that we're undertaking at the moment also to go into space. And that is, I think, the fight that we have to fight for. But when we're talking about resources, it's always about fighting who gets the resources and who not. But I think for the question, why should we invest in space, we can always say, well, we do want to build up the economy of the future, don't we? So we therefore need to invest in it. We are building up strong infrastructure in space for the earthbound economy anyway. And why not do it properly in the first run?
But I mean, especially this year, I mean, for all of us in the space industry for quite some time, we were pleased to see a new movement, a new momentum. I mean, Thierry Bertrand introduced the European constellation, secure communication, quantum communication. We see the German initiatives, the launcher initiative, or particular, which just got awarded. Are these initiatives going in the way you also think? And I know they might be driven by other political parties, but I mean, I think also you as a politician, you have to overcome this political party core to think beyond that. I mean, you do it for your voters.
Yeah, you know, and the good thing is, I mean, we do have in Germany, we have election campaign at the moment, but I personally don't have that for the next 3 years. So I have the freedom to actually do that and not differentiate and but basically look at the topic where we want to go. And that is actually, you know, I would say it's going in the right direction. First of all, but this is true for probably every topic that you have. You're always saying, it's too little money. We saw that already in the budget when we discussed the budget of 21 till 27 for the European Union. We all know that we cut in space endeavors, even though it doesn't make sense to cut there, because then, I mean, you can cut in other programs, for example, in culture, just as an example. I'm doing it myself, so I don't want to cut there, but then you just do less projects. Cutting in space technology means, okay, you have one less satellite to go up, and then the whole constellation doesn't work as properly as it should be. But the strategy that we see at the moment, or the ideas that are coming up, the initiatives are going, I think, in the right direction. I think we need to force them a little bit more, and to link them, especially to bring them together. I'll give you I hope that that's what's happening at the moment. For example, in the Commission with Monsieur Breton. For example, with the mega constellation. When we have this, I mean, obviously, it's a service that we provide for the people in Europe to have internet across all over Europe. That's cool. That's nice to have. You buy something, you get something. That's good. But on the other hand, what we need to use this whole endeavor for is also, first of all, a geostrategic alternative. Because when we provide internet to Europe, we can also provide internet to Africa, to the whole continent, and use that as a way to work together with Africa. With African countries that can help.
That's what Elon is doing right now, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's what Elon is doing right now with Starlink.
And no, I don't know if he will find customers, because that's the difference here. He needs people to pay for it. We hopefully have a public infrastructure that the European Union covers, and there's also one benefit for it, at least. In my understanding, I was covering a little bit on Uganda, and in Uganda they had the question of voter fraud, and so they cut the internet there, because the companies, also Western companies, wanted to make money in the future in Uganda as well, and the president said cut the internet, so they did. I do believe that Elon would do the same thing, and I have the hope that in regards to freedom of speech and freedom of the internet, the European Union would in this case say, no, the question of freedom of communication is a human basic right, and therefore we will not cut the internet just for the personal interest of one single person. And so this is what I mean with strategic interest in this regard. But then, and now coming back to Europe, I think it would also make sense to use this mega constellation in order to boost up European satellite builders, but also launches, that we increase the industry that we have, and that we don't just rely on monopolistic structures that we've always used, but also build up small and medium enterprises, because that is so far really the engine and the backbone of our economy, in disregard to Chinese and US companies, where you have like this big champions. And so this is the tendency that I want to see, to build up smaller enterprises all over Europe, to have a little bit of competition in between, but therefore, how we say, competition enlarges the business and makes it better. And I think this is really true, and this is where we can find a future benefit for the whole space sector. So this is my hope for this mega constellation, to use it in multiple ways, and not just in one where we have internet in Europe. That's not the main purpose of it, but really to expand on the space economy and the space industry that we have currently in Europe, and to make it more future-proof as well.
I mean, I heard you, and I listened very carefully when you said, "Hey, you would like to see smaller companies to run these businesses," and I hope that for the mega constellation, it will be the case. Even so, I have personally some doubts, and also are seeing what happens in Europe. We will see potentially the big primes again on that. But what is more important, before we coming then to the space sustainability topic, so I would like to chime in one of the questions from Christian Unfried. He asked, what would you propose to politically support national regulators in successfully enforcing space sustainability, and at the same time enabling, if not even demanding, interworking on global level? So what are your thoughts on that?
I want to start with the end of the question, because this is, I think, the most needed and most important thing that we do. If I would have like a genie to fulfill my wish, there would be the place where I would start, to have international rules, and not just some nice guidelines, but really rules to establish sustainability in space, to ensure that we use the resources of space in orbit, as well as the resources that we bring up there, that we use them not just sustainable, but also responsible, and future oriented, because the space itself is something that belongs to all mankind, and so therefore it should be treated as such. But you all know that this is highly problematic with the other member states of the United Nations, and that we have different interests there. And I think it will not be as easy as it was to introduce the Outer Space Treaty, to broaden the extent of it. And so therefore I think and that's why I think it is so important to have a comprehensive European space law, because then we can set a standard in the international community and say, this is how you do sustainable space. This is how you treat our common heritage, as I see it at least, how you treat it in a respectful manner for also future generations. And that is what we need. On how to do it, first of all, of course, we need to have a certain necessity. Whenever you launch anything, you need to have a clear protocol on what to do when its life cycle ends. And then we need to ensure in the future that we also bring back and recycle the materials and the satellites and everything that we have in orbit, because I also am critical with just burning it up in the atmosphere, because we don't know what happens, right? But until we don't know, I think at least we should study it and maybe reduce the undertaking for two reasons. We don't know what the outcome is if you burn everything just up in the atmosphere, and also we're wasting resources there. I think that's never useful. So this should be, we should look for an alternative there as well. And the perfect place for that, to be honest, is of course the international level. It is a problem for the whole international community, and therefore it should together solve this issue. And that is actually what we are proposing from the green side, is also to have an international space agency that takes on these topics. But it will of course take quite some time to install it on the international level.
Got it. We just finished our pre-talk for the upcoming Space Café Scotland on Thursday, and there was a similar point to say, hey, yeah, we, the Scottish government, should set up some rules. And the point from the panelists was, hey, wait a moment, there is a space sustainability rating, which just was handed over to the EPFL by the World Economics Forum, which gives some rules set of how to judge a space activity sustainable. And on that note, I mean, space sustainability, space security, space debris, we hear the G2 putting their focus on that right now. And I think that's great. That's a first great step. How would you like to push that important topic forward? And what do you see as the hurdles on that? Because, I mean, we had one of our contributors who is in the audience today, Valentin. He proposed, hey, stop all unnecessary space flights until we have a solution. It sounds radical, but sure, I mean, why not thinking out of the box right now? Now we have the chances. So, but over to you. What would you like to push, or how would you like to push these important topics forward?
Well, you asked for what are the hurdles with it. I think, again, to have all the ideas, the guidelines, the proposals. I mean, and it's not I mean, they're very much on detail on the question of sustainability, but they're not the first one with proposals for regulation of space or in space. And we also have on the UN level all these guidelines, and it's all great. But guidelines are not binding contracts. And that is a problem. That is always a problem. And even, binding contracts without sanctions are also a problem, because it's hard to make them happen. That's what we see, for example, with the Paris Climate Agreement. So what we need as soon as possible is first of all a binding contract on the on the international level that precisely regulates the question of sustainability, but also other questions like, for example, private ownership of space objects, etc., or liability costs, and so on and so forth. To have a clear rule book, basically, on what you can do and what you cannot do in space, to also then regulate how many space flights we have, what positions on orbits are taken by whom, and then also say, okay, you can't just, send up 20,000 satellites, and other member states of the UN cannot. That's just not fair, because because the space then is gone. But to regulate it fairly across the globe, and for that, again, I think the solution should be an international space agency that undertakes exactly that. We have the comparison. We do have a agency for the deep sea that does exactly that. We know in theory we could harness resources from the deep sea. The deep sea doesn't belong to any country, so therefore there was a regulation has been made in place that established in Jamaica a agency that does exactly that, and that if you want to mine for different resources in the deep sea, you go to that agency, and then You tell them, this is my project. I want to drill exactly here. This is, and then you have to pay a fee for that. And with that, they mitigate all the debris that you put out and so on and so forth. And they also control that not, one country is taking everything and taking all the resources, but that you give something back to everybody, because it's not belonging to one country, but to all of them. And so in a very similar approach to use the same idea for the space, I think makes a lot of sense, because then we ensure that that we don't have in the end 3 or 4, 5 spacefaring moguls who control space, and a lot of other people who cannot do anything about it. And that's, I think, the ultimate way forward. But the hurdles about this is, of course, everybody wants at the moment to preserve their interests. The US is probably at the moment currently not really interested to limit themselves in giving up, limiting themselves in registering satellites, when they are the ones where the 2 biggest companies are that have the most space exploitation. They're not interested in reducing look at their space law. They say, you just bring down the resources from space to Earth, and we recognize it as valid ownership. Whereas everybody else says, no, that's not the way to do it, because it's not in line with the Outer Space Treaty. So they are not if the US is not interested in changing anything, then we have a big problem, because they are the most relevant country in this regard. And I hope that we will see changes, though. First of all, because we have, and that's why I'm also asking for, a stronger European strategy on that. Mm-hmm. We also see a competition from especially China, but also within the US, we know that there are companies, smaller companies, who are saying, please, we do need rules, because otherwise it's even for us in the US too hard to establish a business model if the 2 big ones, basically monopolies, take up everything and use Wild West tactics to get everything that they want. And so I hope that we will find a dent in there to persuade the US to come to the table and say, okay, we do need a new set of rules that is not what has been presented so far. Let's put it diplomatic, and will extend on the basic assumption of the Outer Space Treaty.
Okay, interesting thoughts, I have to say. I mean, there's one question I would like to put in here from Victor Production. What would you suggest? Who will enforce these kind of rule set, space rules, as he mentioned? I mean, I would argue with what you said before. Hey, we have the Outer Space Treaty, and it's clearly stated for the benefit of all mankind, humankind, first of all. Second, we have the long-term sustainability guidelines, and we are now in this process to their adaptation, country by country, because it's a national thing. So, and that takes time. So there are a few things that are going in the direction you requested, but who should enforce it? I mean, is that what Space Force is for at the end, or will be?
Hope not. No, I hope not.
Hey, well, maybe I don't know. They came in peace.
Yeah, they do come in peace. No, this quite a with the Space Force, it's quite a different topic. But I think that when we're talking about international law, the enforcement question is always tricky. Yeah. But at the moment, when we look at the Outer Space Treaty, the only way, speaking as let's say you're a private enterprise and you have a liability clause to different private enterprise, or you have a question of who owns what in space, resources, mining stuff, or even just space in the orbit. The current way over the OST is to go to your country, ask your country to go to the International Court of Justice, taking the other country of which the other spacecraft is registered to court, then have an international case between country 1 and country 2, fighting it out, and then whenever this is finished, giving any liabilities or whatever the solution back down to the company. Highly problematic, if you ask me. So to have the possibility to enable a court or a system like that, in which private entities can also go directly, maybe against a decision from an international space agency, maybe against decision from their own member state country, or to a different country, or to another private entity. I think that does make sense. How to enforce that, again, is problematic, but with what for example the enforcement of this deep sea agency is, the mechanism there, as I understood, is that you hopefully that the countries do it by themselves and just agree on the judgment that has been given, as we do it in basically the WTO, etc. And if not, they lose the ability to apply for registration, for example. And I mean, so there is the possibility of sanctions to say, okay, if you do not follow the rules that we set up collectively in this space agency, this international accord. I mean, in the end, it's an international contract. If you do not follow it, then you cannot profit from it anymore in the future. That's what we always do. And also in international law, I mean, that's also the thing that we saw, especially with Trump. If you go out of every international treaty, well, in the future, the other countries will question if they want to work together with you anymore, because you're not trustworthy. That's in the end the big step that we have to undertake then. And then, for example, European Union should be very precisely and very cohesive to say, no, if you're not following international law, well, we're not going to have a relationship with you any further.
Okay. I know we are running terrible out of time, and our production team waved their hands already, but I would like to ask, I hope we can end on a positive note. So what can Europe do to keep its position in space in the future? Or is our future just as a junior partner of NASA or China, or both? And there's this question that I'm asking all my guests at the end. So how do you envision our future as humankind in space?
Well, first of all, I hope that we will, with the European Union and its member states, to bring together the great work that we're already doing, and to ensure in the first step that we cooperate even more when it comes to space issues. And then for that to be ahead, not be ahead, but like to be a relevant factor in the world, not just from who spends the most money and who does the most missions and so on, but also from a intellectual standpoint. I think it would be very wise, or would be a great way to build up a European Space Academy that really brings together different viewpoints or different topics together, all working in the field of space. So not just engineering, maybe medicine and biology and the classical, let's say like that, spacefaring topics, but also law, politics, and maybe even philosophy and all of that, to really bring together and have a campus where people think about what are we doing with space? What are we researching? Where do we want to go? And basically, maybe even on a philosophical level, answering your last question, where do we see ourselves, the humankind, in the future? And to me personally, it is, I'm a politician and a lawyer, and so therefore a little bit more interested of this. Not so much of the technological aspect of it, even though it's fascinating, it's great. But I think we have with spacefaring and with the whole topic of space, we do have a topic that brings people together. Because to look at the stars is really, for every human, there is something so special, and to wonder what is going on there. And we saw even during the hardest times of the Cold War, in spacefaring, the big powers have always worked together. And that is something to build up on. And that's something that I'm hoping for, that we're not undertaking this country against this one, and we want to be stronger than China or the US and Germany versus France or anything like that, but that in the end, we work together as humankind and understand this as an adventure where we all come together and work together. This is my goal for humankind. And so I think then we have a very interesting endeavor to explore new worlds and maybe at some point set foot on the Mars, but not as Elon Musk's home colony, but as humankind's future. I don't know, not even colony, but like brother
settlement.
Yeah. Yes.
No, thank you very much for your words, and I know we haven't talked about your idea of the Space Academy, but I promise that we will reach out to you and find another format, and we have Kara in the room here who will just follow up on that. So because with the 33 minutes, I'm afraid we have to come to an end. Even so, I would love to continue our inspiring talk, but be assured we will continue following Europe in space or in our future space cafes and in our magazine. So next events are, and the next days is Europe in space at its best. So on Thursday, as mentioned, and yes, I count Scotland still as part of Europe in that. So our next Space Café Scotland is coming up by Angela Mattis, and she will talk about the Scottish Space Sustainability Challenge with Christina Tamane, Daniel Smith, Moriba Jah, and Massimiliano Vasile. On next week, on the 6th of July, I will have the chance to speak with Professor Enrico Stoll from the Technical University in Berlin. So about their 30 years of heritage in building satellites and what comes in the future. And Berlin is, I mean, in the heart of Europe, obviously, and vital hub for everything. I mean, we can do everything here in Berlin, of course, and we can also do space. On the 8th of July, we have our next Space Café Germany by Andreas Schepers, and his guest is the German new space rock star Daniel Metzler, the CEO of ESA Aerospace and the winner of the German contest for new space. And then, just as a foresight, on the 22nd of July, we will have our Space Café, our Space Law Breakfast by Stephen Freeland with his guest Elena Morozova and Andrei Mishtal. You see there's a break in between. Yes, we are going into a summer break. So for the next 3 weeks with just a few activities, or not in the next few weeks, so as of the 10th of July. But the Space Law Breakfast in his summer edition will happen because it's winter in Australia, so we can do that. So all events are going to be online on Eventbrite. And as always, we would like to hear from you, your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. All your questions you have are put in the Q&A. We will send to the team of Niklas and ask for an answer. And we will see that with our recap, you will get our answers or their answers. So don't forget also to sign up to our daily or bi-weekly newsletters. And if you like to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support will help us. Take your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global. I'm quite sure I said it before, but it's the truth. We need your support. Thank you very much for your interest today. And thank you, Niklas. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for your inspiring talk and being my guest. And thanks again to the entire team behind the scene for doing their great job week by week again. I hope you all will stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you in 2 days in Scotland or next week. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.